Hey everyone. Well, in a previous video, we talked about the concept of right to repair. It's really this issue that talks about the idea of ownership and if you as a consumer have the right to fix things that you buy as they break. And, especially as a lot of high-tech companies shift from this product model to a software as service model, there's a lot of money riding on controlling this whole aspect. And it's really something investors should probably keep an eye on, especially as policy and regulation starts to evolve and shift in this area. So I recently talked to Aaron Perzanowski. He's a law professor at Case Western University and the author of the book, Right to Repair. And in this portion of our interview, we really take a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the business incentives that companies like Apple and Microsoft have in keeping control over repair and some of the policy changes that we see coming that have been driven by regulation and by investors. Take a look. Can you talk a little bit about this right to repair movement? So we've seen, this gradual trying to claw back some rights for consumers. And I feel like we've really kind of seen a shift in the last couple of years with more lawmakers coming on board and even just investor pressure for these companies to really kind of start opening up. Can you talk a little bit about that movement and what you're seeing kind of shift?
Yeah, so over the past several years, we have seen legislation introduced in more than half of the states in the United States to provide a right to repair in the sense that manufacturers would be required by law to make parts and information and tools available directly to consumers and to independent repair shops to make these sorts of repairs. That's been the result of a really broad coalition. So on one hand, you've got independent repair providers, small businesses around the country that really care about this issue. You have consumer advocates. You have consumers themselves expressing their desire for the right to repair the products that they own. In the automotive space, this really matters to insurance companies who want to see the costs of collision repairs go down and the insurance premiums that their customers pay go down as a result. And so there's been this movement that's been putting pressure on device makers from all sorts of directions. So some of it's legislative. There has been some regulatory work done here by the Federal Trade Commission, which has issued a report prompted by the Biden administration's interest in the right to repair issue, largely endorsing the positions of the right to repair advocates. We've also seen companies like Microsoft and Apple being responsive to pressure from shareholders who have expressed their own interest in these companies changing their policies when it comes to repair. So all of these different influences are coming together in a way that I think makes it really likely that we are going to see, I think, some meaningful change in the legal landscape around repair in the near future.
There's a lot of attention, I think, right now being paid to this idea of sustainable investing. And, this issue does have a lot of relation to that because a lot of these products end up in landfills. There's a lot of environmental harm that can come from this. So talk a little bit about how some of those interests have really kind of come into play and maybe have pushed these companies to act on their own where they otherwise maybe wouldn't have.
Sure. So, consumers broadly and shareholders in particular have been expressing greater concern around issues of environmental impact and sustainability in recent years. And this issue does really have a pretty dramatic environmental impact. So when you think about the electronic waste that gets produced every year when we discard these devices, we're talking about tens of millions of metric tons of electronic waste every year. And electronic waste is really problematic because, of heavy metals, rare earth metals, other sorts of materials that are inside these devices that can cause real environmental damage and negative health impacts as well. And so we're seeing that pressure come from shareholders to address those environmental impacts. At the same time, the economics, I think, are starting to favor more responsible behavior on the part of device makers. So, when you're trying to mine rare earth metals, or even more common materials, copper and gold that end up in our smartphones. That's an increasingly expensive proposition. And it's much easier to harvest those materials from recycled, discarded devices than it is to, wrest them out of the earth itself. But given the demand for these devices, recycling really can't keep pace. And so that makes repair, I think, really necessary for these device markets to be sustainable and really economically viable in the long run. So I think we're starting to see some recognition of that from the device makers themselves.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting because I feel like a lot of the arguments from the device makers, and I think, some people might say, well, like they're the ones that have put all this money and R&D, and they've got, as you said, they've got patents and the trademarks, like why shouldn't they be able to control all this? And I'm just kind of wondering, like, is there a balance here that can be struck? Is there a good model out there where, it can be beneficial for both consumers and these companies to really open some of this up?
So I think what we're going to see in the future, what I hope we see in the future, is real robust competition in the repair market. Right now, in too many markets, I think what we see are restrictions that steer consumers, and in some cases really force consumers to rely on the repair services of the manufacturer or their sort of authorized repair. Moving forward, what I think we ought to see is a marketplace defined by robust competition. And in that market, I'm pretty confident that lots of people are still going to choose to take their iPhone to the Apple store. It's convenient, they trust them, they have brand recognition, they've got a lot of things going for them that I think will help them continue to have a really strong foothold in that market. But I think what we will see as a result of competition is some more pressure on the price for parts and repair services. And ultimately, I think that's what we ought to expect to see in the marketplace, is like real, genuine competition rather than using software and legal threats in a way that kind of force consumers to rely on these authorized repair services with really inflated price points.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. And as always, you can hit the subscribe button to get more videos like this. I love to know your thoughts from watching this. It's a huge issue. It touches so many products in our lives. Let me know your thoughts below. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.